welcome to Global News and Echo Television International. I am Lois Turaki. Let's look at stories making headlines. We begin with Biden, Sunak agreeing to support Ukraine in first call. US, Japan, South Korea promise reaction if North Korea tests nuclear bomb. Bali's pandemic renters face impolite awakening as curse surge. New NASA instrument detects dozens methane super emitters from space, and Russia struggles to add weapons production for Ukraine war. Joe Biden, United States President, and Britain's new Prime Minister Rishi Sunak have agreed to work together to support Ukraine and stand up to China, the White House said in a statement on Tuesday in a first phone call hours after Sunak became British third Prime Minister this year. The two leaders reiterated the special relationship that exists between their countries and said they will work together to advance global security and prosperity. Biden and Sunak also agreed to address the challenges posed by China, which Washington has recognized as its highest geopolitical and economic rival on the world stage. Downing Street released its own readout of the call in which it said the pair deliberated the degree of UK-US cooperation both bilaterally and in regions such as the Indo-Pacific, as well as the more controversial issue of Northern Ireland. Biden earlier on Tuesday had congratulated Sunak in a tweet. On Monday, he described the naming of Britain's first non-white prime minister as pretty outstanding, a groundbreaking milestone. Sunak, the eldest son of a doctor and pharmacist of Indian descent, inherited an economic crisis after the resignation of Liz Truss after 6 weeks in office. On Tuesday, he held his first call with President Volodymyr Zelensky, in which he promised the UK's steadfast support for Ukraine, main European ally of the United States, in deployment and supporting the Ukrainian military as it tries to resist the Russian invasion, which started in February. Both his predecessors, Boris Johnson and Truss, had vocally assured full backing to the war-torn country, and on Tuesday evening, the new Prime Minister said the UK's support will be as strong as ever under his leadership. Calling it a privilege to speak to Zelensky, who had previously sent him congratulations, Sunak tweeted, "Both he and the Ukrainian people can count on the UK's continuous solidarity and support. We will always stand with Ukraine." Zelensky in a tweet called it an excellent conversation, with the pair agreeing to write a new chapter in relations between the two countries. An unparalleled scale of response will be necessary if North Korea conducts a seventh test of a nuclear weapon, the United States, Japan, and South Korea have cautioned. The warning was issued on Wednesday amidst worries by the U.S. and its regional allies that North Korea could be poised to recommence nuclear bomb testing for the first time since 2017. Cho made his comments alongside Japan's Vice Foreign Minister Takeo Mori and U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman. North Korea has been carrying out weapon tests at an extraordinary pace this year, firing over 24 shots on medium-range ballistic missiles in recent weeks, including a missile that overflew Japan. Sherman also said the U.S. will use its full military capabilities, including nuclear, conventional, and missile defense, to defend its allies Japan and South Korea. North Korea needs to understand that the U.S. commitment to the security of South Korea and Japan is ironclad, she said. U.S. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said in a statement that Sherman also reiterated that the U.S. was continuing to seek serious and sustained dialogue with the DPRK, Democratic Republics of Korea, the official name for the North Korea. Cho, during his talks with Sherman, raised concerns that a new North Korean nuclear weapons strategy adopted in September raises the possibility of its arbitrary use of nuclear weapons. The USS Ronald Reagan and accompanying ships in September conducted joint military drills with South Korean forces in response to a North Korean ballistic missile test in what was their first joint military training involving a U.S. aircraft carrier since 2017. Angered by South Korea's military activities, Pyongyang last week fired hundreds of artillery shells off its coast in what it called a grave warning to its neighbor to the south. Sherman met earlier on Tuesday with Japan's Mori and confirmed further strengthening of the Japan-US alliance and other shared goals, including the complete denuclearization of North Korea and their joint response to China's increasingly assertive actions in the region. On economy, in Bali, Indonesia, at the peak of the pandemic, refugees Philippines paid 2.8 million rupiah, $180 every month to rent a hotel room in Indonesia's Bali. But when international tourists started returning to the famous resort island and Emas earlier this year, Maria's Hotel in Canggu, a coastal village popular, suffers and night revelers increase its prices fivefold. As Bali recovers from COVID-19, the cost of accommodation on the island is rising in a sobering reality check for renters, many of them foreigners who sought shelter in Bali during the pandemic. When Indonesia closed its borders in April 2020, reducing daily visitors from over 44,000 to practically zero, many hotels turned to the long-term rental market to survive. The hoteliers rolled out enormous discounts to appeal some of the tens of thousands of foreigners on the island. Faced with augmented competition, the island's 4,000 holiday villas fell asking prices by 50 to 75% to secure tenants. With no way of knowing when or if tourists will return, hundreds of hotels ceased training and were listed for sale. But with international travel roaring back to life, Bali has become a landlord's market practically overnight. Land and dwelling values in the most famous parts of the island are also fast growing. According to Ching, is the omnibus law legislation introduced in November 2020 that permits foreigners to buy apartments and land while granting them permanent ownership and resale rights. On weather and climate, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration NASA scientists, using a tool designed to study how dust affects climate, have discovered over 50 methane-emitting hotspots around the world, a progress that could aid fight the potent greenhouse gas. On Tuesday, NASA said its Earth Surface Mineral Dust Source Investigation EMIT had identified over 50 methane super emitters in Central Asia, the Middle East and the southwestern United States since it was mounted in July on board the International Space Station. The recently measured methane hotspots, some earlier known and others just identified, include sprawling oil and gas facilities and huge landfill sites. Methane is accountable for approximately 30% of the world rise in temperatures to date. Circling Earth every 90 minutes from its perch on board the space station, some 400 kilometers, 250 miles high, EMIT is able to scan vast tracts of the planet dozens of kilometers across, while it's also focusing on areas as small as football field. The instrument, called an imaging spectrometer, was built mainly to detect the mineral composition of dust blown into Earth's atmosphere from desert and other arid regions, but it has established a depth at detecting huge methane emissions. Examples of the newly imaged methane super emitters showcased by JPL on Tuesday included a cluster of 12 plumes from oil and gas infrastructure in Turkmenistan, some stretching more than 30 kilometers, 20 miles. Scientists estimate the Turkmenistan plumes collectively spew methane at rate of 50.400 kg per hour, equaling the peak flow from the 2015 Aliso Canyon gas field blown out near Los Angeles that reveals or levels as one of the major accidental methane releases in U.S. history. Two other large emitters were an oil field in New Mexico and a waste processing complex in Iran, emitting closely 29,000 kg of methane per hour combined. The methane plume south of the Iranian capital, Tehran, was not more than 408 kilometers, 3 miles long, JPL officials said. Neither side was earlier known to scientists. A byproduct of decomposing organic material and the chief components of natural gas used in power plants, methane accounts for a fraction of all human gas caused greenhouse emissions, but has about 80 times more heat trapping capacity pound for pound than carbon dioxide. Likened with CO2, which remains in the atmosphere for centuries, methane lingers for only about a decade, meaning that reductions in methane emissions have more instant impact on planetary warming. On Russia-Ukraine war, Russian President Vladimir Putin, facing military production delays and increasing battlefield losses, has urged his government to cut through bureaucracy to crank out enough weapons and supplies to feed his forces in Ukraine, where a Ukrainian counter-offensive has put Russia's forces on the back foot. The Russian military supply shortfalls in the eighth-month war have been so distinct that Putin had to form a structure to try to tackle them. Putin chaired on Tuesday a new committee intended to accelerate the production and delivery of weapons and supplies for Russian troops and emphasize on the need to gain higher tempo in all areas. Reports from Russia acknowledge that several of those mobilized to fight in Ukraine, a number the Russian president said was 222,000 out of an original aim of 300,000, have not been provided with sufficient needed equipment such as medical kits and flak jackets and have had to find their own supplies. Putin tried to show all is well by visiting a training site in Russia where he was shown well-equipped soldiers last week. Other reports have proposed that Russian soldiers are progressively forced to use old and sometimes unreliable equipment, that some of the newly mobilized troops have been rushed to the front lines in the war with little training. To substitute for rising scarce Russian-made long-range precision weapons, the United Kingdom's Ministry of Defense said Russia was likely to now resort to the use of a large number of drones to try to penetrate Ukrainian air defenses. According to the United Nations, from the start of the Russian invasion on February 24th to beginning of October, there were about 15,246 civilian casualties recorded in Ukraine. Of those, 14 people were killed and 9,132 injured. Around 6.7 million Ukrainians have fled the country and are now living across Europe, according to the United Nations. There are more stories. In magnitude 6.4 earthquake in Philippines, at least 26 injured. Police and civil aviation officials said closely 26 people were injured by a magnitude 6.4 earthquake that hit Ilicos, northern Philippines, at the home province of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., where the international airport in the capital city of Laong was ordered to close temporarily on Wednesday due to damage from earthquake and sending terrified residents into the streets and triggering substantial damage to a hospital. The earthquake, which struck at about 10:59 p.m. on Tuesday close to the upland town of Dolores, was felt as far away as the capital, Manila, over 330 kilometers, 205 miles to the south. The president, also known as Bongbong, warned of aftershocks on Wednesday and advised people in a tweet to stay out of all tall structures. Patients were evacuated from the 200-bed Mariano Marcos Memorial Hospital in Batak City, about 60 kilometers north of the epicenter, which sustained some of the worst reported damage so far. No less than 2 towns in Cagayan province temporarily lost electricity due to damaged power lines. A number of bridges and roads in outlying provinces were damaged. A century-old Christian church was destroyed in the town of La Paz in Abra, with part of its bell tower collapsing and some walls cracked, littering the church's grassy yards with debris, officials said. Dolores Town Police Officer Jeffrey Blaine said the buildings were shaking, so people ran outside. 11 people were killed and several hundred were injured in July when a magnitude 7.0 quake hit the mountainous Abra province, causing landslides and ground fissures. In October 2013, a magnitude 7.1 earthquake hit the central island of Bohol, killing over 200 people. Earthquakes are a daily incident in the Philippines, which sits along the Pacific Ring of Fire, an arc of severe seismic and volcanic activity stretching from Japan through Southeast Asia and across the Pacific Basin. Prime Minister Ardern says New Zealand couple detained in Iran freed. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has said 2 travel bloggers from New Zealand who disappeared from public view for nearly 4 months after entering Iran have now safely left the country. According to reports, the 2 social media influencers identified were Topher Richwhite and Bridget Thockwar, who posed under the name Expedition Earth. New Zealand's Prime Minister revealed on Wednesday that her administration had been working hard for quite some months to ensure the safe exit of the couple from Iran, saying the couple had endured difficult circumstances. She did not offer details of the negotiations with Iran's government, but said she had not shied away from criticizing the recent bloody crackdown on young protesters in that country, largely women, stringent interpretation of Islamic law and authoritarian governance. Neither Arden nor the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade released any details on the detained couple or where they had been held. The government also on Wednesday updated its travel warnings for Iran and argued New Zealanders presently there to leave the country. A statement read, New Zealand continues to call for curb by authorities in reacting to the demonstrations and for better protection of women's rights and freedom of expression. Iran has continually accused outside forces of rousing up the protests inside the country, and Westerners are gradually or regularly taken into custody. Detainees have often been released after intensive behind-the-scenes negotiations which have been known to involve prison swaps. On sports, Qatar planning to ensure maximum security at World Cup 2022. Qatar is expected to position tens of thousands of security forces to guarantee a seamless World Cup. The host country has signed many security cooperation deals with numerous countries. Over 1.2 million fans are expected to visit Qatar during the competition, which runs to December 18th. Qatar security forces, along with partners from 13 countries, have carried out a 5-day security drills across the country. The exercises were intended at testing the preparedness and responsiveness of the emergency services, reports said. According to the tournament's security committee, the drills, dubbed Watan, which translates to nation in Arabic, involved 32,000 government security personnel and 17,000 from the private security sector. Turkey earlier announced it will send more than 3,000 riot police officers to assist secure stadiums and hotels. Turkey will also send 1,000 special operation police officers, 50 bomb specialists, and 80 sniper dogs, it said. Turkish Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu said in January that Turkey has also trained 677 Qatari security personnel in 38 different professional areas without elaborating on the specifics. In August, Pakistan agreed to send forces to Qatar to offer security during the tournament. The troops landed in Doha earlier this month, according to reports. Also, that month, the French Parliament approved the deployment of approximately 220 security personnel to the Gulf state for the tournament. The deployment will guarantee the security of fans, including French nationals, the French Interior Minister said. Qatar has also inked a security cooperation agreement with Morocco. In May, the United Kingdom's Ministry of Defense said it will support Doha delivering a safe and secure World Cup. The United Arab Emirates-based The National reported earlier this year that former Jordanian soldiers were also being offered roles at the World Cup. Now in Africa, ex-Niger leader criticizes international community for ignoring Sahel insurgency. Mahamadou Issoufou, the former president of Niger Republic, has cautioned of dire consequences that befell the Sahel, a region plagued by acute insurgency. Issoufou added, saying the war in the Sahel has been ignored by the world and instead more attention given to Ukraine terminates a double standard. The former leader was speaking during the just concluded Dakar 8th edition of the Dakar International Forum. He said he held the international community responsible for the situation in the Sahel following their military intervention in Libya. The war's effect has been felt strongly in Africa, where food prices hiked as imports, notably of cereals and fertilizers, were limited. France and the West in general are often the butt of accusations of neocolonialism in Africa, that they try to enforce strategies on local governments or promote their own economic interests. In the Central African Republic and Mali, Russia has built up close ties that have translated into Russian military backing and reducing French influence. Zakharopoulou assured that when Paris sent a military mission such as the Barkhane force to fight jihadist insurgencies in the was not to substitute for local armies, but to support them. Lastly, on global news, 16th Ethiopia-Djibouti joint ministerial meeting kicks off in Addis Ababa. In Addis Ababa, October 25th, 2022, the 16th edition of Ethiopia-Djibouti joint ministerial meeting started in Addis Ababa on Tuesday. The meeting targeted at strengthening political, economic and people-to-people relations between the two countries and to jointly solve the challenges they encounter. The Director General of African Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Ethiopia, Ambassador Fisahene Shawu, in his opening remarks talked about the solid relationship between Ethiopia and Djibouti. He pointed out that the joint meeting, which concludes on October 27th, will emphasize on strategic issues. The two countries have strong ties in culture, language and other spheres, the head of the Djibouti delegation, Ambassador Mahedin Opsi, said. During the meeting, professionals are expected to discuss on ways to further strengthen cooperation in trade, agriculture, water and energy, transport, logistics, diplomacy, as well as scientific matters between the two countries. They are also expected to advise and propose solutions to challenges of the two countries. In addition, the experts will also discuss regional and international issues, economic integration, law, migration and political cooperation, among other issues. According to ENA's report, the 15th Joint Commission meeting was held in Djibouti in 2019 and it was not held since then due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's go for a short break, and when we come back, it will be Zoom on Nigeria. Stay with us. Welcome back. Zoom on Nigeria. Children bear the brunt of Nigeria's food crisis. 10 years ago, the threat of jihadist violence forced some to abandon the fertile land their family had cultivated for generations outside the village of Gonglong in northeastern Nigeria's Borno state. Their only option was to walk a plot of land that was far less fertile, but at least was relatively safe, for it lay within the village's secure perimeter. Nigeria's jihadist insurgency has shifted and progressed since it started in 2009, with Boko Haram militants losing ground to military offensives and forced to battle rivals connected to the Islamic State group. But for farmers like Mustafa, the grinding war remains a constant menace that keeps him from his land, like several of the over 2 million people displaced due to the conflict. Past the military checkpoints that surround and protect Gonglong, the fields have become tantalizing lush from the rainy season, but remain off limits. Much of the northeast food-producing land remains at the mercy of jihadist insurgents. The battle to create an Islamic caliphate in the region has left more than 40,000 dead and created one of the worst humanitarian crises of the 21st century. 2 years have passed, but the grandmother has not forgotten the day in December 2020 when jihadists slaughtered 43 farmers on a rice field in the neighboring village of Koshibe. Since that massacre, only a few people go beyond the army's barricades and protective trenches to walk the land with fear in their stomach, she said. Doing so also means taking the risk of being accused by the army of cooperating with jihadist fighters and of being arrested. But recent floods, which destroyed thousands of farms in the region, double-digit inflation caused by the coronavirus pandemic, and then the Russian offensive in Ukraine are additional factors worsening an already catastrophic situation, she said. According to the United Nations, some 370,000 children under the age of 5 face a high risk of mortality, and 5,000 children are at risk of dying without abrupt funding to respond to the crisis. Fuel subsidy dilemma poses additional threat to Nigeria's weak economy. With federal government's plan to stop the costly petrol subsidy by June 2023, professionals have long predicted that with Nigeria's revenue continuing declining, it is only a matter of time before subsidy is abandoned. Many of these experts have been constant in maintaining that the trillions of naira spent by the country on fuel subsidy can be deployed to other creative sectors of the Nigerian economy, specifically education. The fear over subsidy removal has always been the effect it will have on Nigerians. This has always been a source of friction between the government and labor unions. The government has often sought to soft pedal on the issue. However, it appears that the removal of subsidy is only a matter of time. The huge sums going into the payment of subsidies every year can be taken to other sectors of the economy so that with time, Nigeria can grow into an economy that is strong enough to survive shocks of any nature. The World Bank has continually cautioned Nigeria's huge subsidy poses an existential crisis to the country and its more than 200 million citizens for many years now. While Nigeria has continued to disappear behind a thicket of debt, not enough has been done by successive administrations to make the country self-sustaining. The net result of this, experts contend, is a country almost brought to its knees on which is broke and broken. According to the Nigeria Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative 90, the sum of 13.7 trillion naira, that's 74.386 billion US dollars, was spent on fuel subsidy in 15 years. Executive Secretary of the 90, Orji Ogbonnaya Orji, made this revelation during the House of Representatives ad hoc committee investigation on fuel subsidy regime between 2013 and 2020. Only recently, the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, had in her presentation of the 2023 to 2025 medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper revealed that the federal government was exposed to spend, or expected rather, to spend the sum of 6.7 trillion naira on petrol subsidy payments in 2023. The disclosure, unsurprisingly, drew a lot of criticisms from Nigerians. As far back as the 1970s, the federal government of Nigeria has been in the business of subsidizing fuel consumption for its citizens. While the perennial scheme has directly mitigated hardship on the masses, it has indirectly inflicted poverty on the masses in the long run. Fuel subsidy has denied Nigerians critical infrastructure that could have spurred economic growth over the decades. Today, Nigeria suffers acute infrastructure deficits. And finally, Jumbo severance package, Buhari, Osinbajo, others get 63 billion naira, pensioners kick. Severance packages for the president, Major General Muhammadu Buhari retired, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, state governors and other political appointees leaving office in 2023 may cost the country about 63.45 billion naira, reports have shown. The number also covers the severance gratuity for ministers, commissioners, National Assembly members, State Assembly members, and special advisors. It, however, does not include special assistants. A breakdown of the package indicates that the federal government will pay out 3.39 billion naira, while the states will cough out 60.6 billion naira. The beneficiaries' package was collated from a document obtained from the website of the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Allocation Commission. The severance allowance is, however, separate from other financial packages which may be in place or as retirement benefits or pensions for some of the political office holders. As approved by the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, political office holders were entitled to 300% of their annual salaries as severance. In addition, ex-governors will be paid 100% of their annual basic salary for life after leaving office. They will also get new cars every 3 years, a house in any part of the country, free medical care, as well as furniture allowance and car maintenance allowance. They are also entitled to cooks, stewards, gardeners, and other domestic staff, among other perks, including policemen and Department of State Services operatives for life. It was earlier reported that a total of 13.81 billion naira was proposed for the payment of pensions to former presidents, vice presidents, heads of state, chiefs of general staff, retired heads of state, permanent secretaries, as well as retired heads of government agencies and parastatals in the 2023 fiscal year. The 8 special advisors in the presidency are expected to get 5.83 million naira each, totaling 46.64 million naira. There are 44 ministers under Buhari, consisting of 27 federal ministers and 17 ministers of state. While each minister is entitled to 60.8 million naira, each minister of state is entitled to 5.87 million naira. In total, they will get 258.8 million naira, with ministers getting 164.60 million naira and ministers of state receiving 93.92 million naira each. A recap of our major stories say Biden, Sunak agree to support Ukraine in first call. US, Japan, South Korea promise reaction if North Korea tests nuclear bomb. Bali's pandemic renters face impolite awakening as costs surge. New NASA instrument detect dozens methane super emitters from Spain. And Russia struggles to add weapons production for Ukraine war. Remember, success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Thanks for watching and have a lovely day.